Hi, this is Jeff Richardson. Welcome back. This video is really to help you manage and sort through all this information that's coming through us during this election season. And this one's really specifically about those that us and them, that's polarizing and experience that we all are. Hi, this is Jeff Richardson. Welcome back. This video is really designed to help you manage and sort through all this information that's coming at us during this election season. And I don't think it's going to end on election day. And specifically, this one's going to be about the us and them polarization that we're all experiencing now. And this strategy really plays off our brain's natural biases, specifically around identity. So I want to talk a little bit about identity, do a little activity, but also get into how our brain treats us and them very differently, and how that links to identity politics. And maybe most important, what can you do to kind of filter that out or break that cycle? So, civilizations have always utilized the us and them as a strategy, for survival, but also for control and order. And so the world's really become much more complex and interdependent. So I think it's really time to revisit we the people, and what that really means to us. So I helped out in a conference, actually I ran it a couple of years, and called Engaging the Other. And we did an activity bringing these polar opposite, both religious and political groups together and talk about identity. So I want to go that activity with you. And so what's really interesting is we simplify it some, but I want you to go in a little bit more in depth to think about those relationships. So I'm going to use professional identity as my starting point. Hang on, fresh sheet of paper here. And so that profession. So let me give you an example. For me, things like being an engineer and being an organizational effectiveness. So these are two things that I identify. These are what my degrees are in. Now I was doing this work early on, but I really haven't. I've come up with a transformational engineer, which pulls both of them together. So again, that's more important to me now than maybe in the past. Now, organizational effectiveness, I used to run at Silicon Valley OD network, and so I have a strong connection with that there. So now we can take something like my employment, right? I work for TCS, so that's who I identify, and those people are from the company, they're my company, right? Within there, I do design thinking, so that's a more specific, right, part of the organization, and then across organizations, people that do that kind of work. Now, I also do things like experiential education, coaching, So these are all these different ways that I look at myself from an identity standpoint. Now, some are stronger than others. Again, I haven't done these, but, right? So you can brainstorm, right? What are your identities? But then we move them up and down, right? Experiential educator. So I'm not I don't do high school and stuff like that. I used to run outdoor ropes courses. And so a lot of my leadership programs even incorporate that, right? So I haven't done as much with SVODN since moving to Texas, right? Maybe the Dallas chapter becomes more. And obviously, the design thinking right now. Maybe something like coach. Maybe it's been lower for me in that I want to do more of these together. So we can play with these ideas, but most importantly is to look and see how many different ways that I have an identity specifically around that. Now we could go further and look at what are my religious identities. Right? It's not just my denomination, right? Within that, what subgroups and what other? Right? How about social, right? What communities and what groups are you in? Oh, it doesn't stick to that top, that's right. Right? What social groups, right? What neighborhoods, right? What communities and groups? And then probably most importantly for this, right? Conversation is political. But it's just not left and right, liberal and Democrat. There's a lot of issues and topics that you might more specifically relate your identity to. So it's important to look at what our identity are, but also the flip side is who do you not identify with. So from a professional standpoint, I work for a IT company, but I don't identify as an IT professional. Right? How do you feel about the HR, right, group, or the training group, or the accountants? Right? Are they in or out? Right? How about the executives? What's your perception on that? And so, kind of fill in the blank. Right? Our company executives are blank. Right? What word comes up for you? So that's the way when we start to look at both who we identify with and maybe who we don't identify with. And so, that it's really important when we have the self-selection part of that versus, somebody labeling me. So I identify with these, but somebody might, right, think negatively about engineers and oh, you're an engineer, one of those type, right? So sometimes it's the tone of voice and how things come, but how they're projecting it maybe negatively, I might look at it very differently. So again, it's fine to have those differences of opinion like that. And so how do you feel when people label you and try to fit you into something? So that's like the term liberal. Yeah, I guess I'm liberal, but I don't identify with that terminology really much at all. Right? And I know people just kind of bucket everybody into this big liberal or conservative group, and there's so much more diversification, right? It's more of a scale, probably not just, right to left, but maybe 3 dimensions. And so when we start to do this us and them, right, we have to realize what's going on in the brain as far as the neuroscience. We can actually see that there's different neural pathways for friends versus foe. And so a completely different set of expectations and things that get strengthened, right, over time. And so obviously in prehistoric time, right, that made a lot of sense, and that's an older part of the brain. And so being able to fit in and knowing who's from what tribe and all that kind of things really mattered. But now again, much more complicated, and maybe power and money and things like that are more drivers of the us and them. So this is a stereotype, right? And stereotypes are about a generalization, right? Usually negative. And it's really, it's a simplification bias of the brain. So much information coming in, I got to be able to quickly make some identify who's a friend and foe, right? And so listen for the certain words, right? The we and us versus them and you. So those kind of things, right, really come out for me. I remember I used to, I lived in Fremont, California. There was about a third Chinese, and it seemed like every time somebody was doing, some crazy driving, move, I thought it was a Chinese person. So I had that bias, that stereotype built up. What happens when I saw, somebody that wasn't Chinese doing something? It was almost like the outlier. I almost forgot about it and discarded it. So over time, I noticed that bias and been able to shift it. And so now I think when people do stuff, it must be a new driver. Because a lot of people move here from another country, maybe have never driven, maybe have a whole different set of rules in which they're using. So that's how those stereotypes, right, not only get set and reinforced over time, but also can be broken. And so that's what we want to look at, is the decision-making part of the bias. And that's like our subconscious behavior, right, that has been developed over your entire lifetime. A lot of it from our childhood that we don't realize is in the deep processes of our brain. And then over time, we either reinforce or we break those. Okay? And so I want to get into the identity politics now. So again, I want you to think about this as a coordinated strategy, right, to have you identify yourself with one group and opposed to and dislike for most part, right? So, right, you do this, hey, if you are like this, right, then you're one of us. But our opponent, right, they're this and this and this, right? Is it then to be positive or negative? Right, those things, the other people are always dumber, uglier, whatever, But we tend to, again, status, we put them down. And so now we've got this us and them format. Now we amplify it, right, with the negativity. If you haven't seen my other video on that topic with the SCARF model, that'll really highlight that. But again, once people get angry or emotional, their frontal cortex, where that decision making, actually gets cut off. Right? Blood stops flowing to that. And so think of these biases as a filter. Right? Sometimes one filter might be stronger than the other based on our identities. Let's admit it. So that those filters. So they get a lot of different filters based on that. Some are more important and some are less. And so how do we check those and test our assumptions about what our biases are? So finally, what they're going to do is simplify the choice. If you're like this, if you're for this, then you're with us and you should vote this way. And then that repetition, right? We're getting bombarded with these messages. Right? This whole branding part of marketing, again, there's tens of thousands of people working, right, to influence your vote. Fact of the matter. So what can you do about it? So I wanted to help you to manage all kinds of different political situations, whether it's a one-on-one conversation, maybe when you're listening to something on TV or the radio, or maybe you just see like a red hat or a sign or some kind of symbol as you're going through. Notice what comes up. So that's what's first and foremost. Now, so notice how you're reacting. Notice the language that other people are using, that you're using to describe. Notice your own reactions when people, call that out to you or label you that way. What do you relate to? What are you not relating to? Right? Notice those things. Write them down. See how that comes up over and over. And then think about how you're categorizing other people. Oh, those people must be like this. And then we want to just stop. Right? Stop, breathe, and give your brain a little chance to catch up. But it stops that mental chain reaction from happening so that your emotions don't get overwhelming and your brain shut down. And think about what's really real. Is it really going to be the worst case scenario? Probably not. So take that back and don't take things so literally. Right? Open up to different perspectives. Right? Maybe there's some different ways to look at things that you weren't aware of. Right? So explore a couple of those options as you're going. And then finally, personalize your responses. Right? Not jumping in and saying, hey, I agree. Right? To say, this part of it I do agree with, but generally I don't agree with these other parts. So that way you can break it up into a little bit more parceled out components, right? And address those and talk about those. And that's where that deeper learning and understanding really comes into. So don't get pushed into this extreme politics that are going on. I lost my button. No, there it is. My no they button. Right? So that's, again, a little reminder that I have. I got this from one of my diversity programs, right, talking about stereotyping. And so having some way that triggers your brain to say, stop. Hey, I'm not going to do that anymore. I want to think more clearly for myself. So that's it. So regardless of who you're voting for, definitely vote. But also think for yourself and all kinds of decisions. And moving forward, how you interact with people. Post comments if you want me to chime back and add some more details. Glad to do that. Share this if there's somebody that you think would benefit, and check out some of the other videos that I got. Again, this whole series is Think for Yourself. Thanks. Enjoy.